Hello, this is Tim Haig. When I first met Salman Rushdie, the threat to his life was still very real. I was sternly warned not to tell anybody that I was going to interview him, and to keep his visit to the studio a secret. Well, last year Salman published his own account of his life living under a fatwa, so there's no need to go into any detail here. And besides, I had just read his novel The Moor's Last Sigh, and I was fairly buzzing with excitement about that. This interview dates from 1995.
You must be bored witless with talking about having to hide and talking about the Iranian fatwa.
Yes, I must say, if I never say the word Iran again, it'll be too soon.
So instead of that, let's talk about the book. The first thing that struck me about the book is the wordplay, the language, which is a very Rushdie thing. But it struck me as almost greedy. Do you accept that? You want to do everything, don't you? You want to have every reference, every.
Yes, I think that's quite true, and I think in fact sometimes I use to myself the phrase "everything novels." You know, I think there are only really two kinds of good novel. There's what I would call a something novel and an everything novel. Now, a something novel is let's take the example of Jane Austen, where you take one strand of hair from the head of the world, and you look at it and you create the universe as they say from a grain of sand. I mean, that's one legitimate way of writing, and I think the other way is to try and be encyclopedic, to try and bring in the whole tumult of life, what one of the characters in this novel calls the great swarm of being itself. And I've always been that kind of crowded writer, I suppose.
And of course, that's what all those cultural references are about, isn't it? Because obviously, your Moor, your central character, is the product of different cultures, as you are. And apart from fracturing all the words, apart from making all the puns, what you've done is you've drawn in Indian films and Hollywood cartoons and English literature, and that's a very conscious thing. You want to do everything.
I want to show the world as fully as I can, and that means bringing in a lot of what one would call low culture as well as high, Eastern as well as Western, and a lot of it arises out of the fact that in India, anyway, there is a relationship to language, not just to English but to Indian languages as well, which is playful. You know, people do enjoy playing with language. People delight conversationally in linguistic play. And I grew up enjoying that kind of talk. Indians are great talkers. You know, they're very gabby. You go to coffee houses in India, and the hubbub of people delightedly arguing and disputing with each other is constant. It is one of the great recreations of India, talk.
And one of the really peculiar things to people like me is the way that you've sort of reverbified all the verbs, or at least you haven't, but your characters do. Instead of you should change your mind, always got to be you've got to changeify your mind.
Yes, that's particularly one family in this novel that does that, and that's not necessarily something that everybody in India says. But what I wanted to suggest was that in families sometimes little family verbal tics develop, and those get inherited from generation to generation. So particular bits of family play, become, if you like, they become a way in which the family describes itself, by making certain jokes, by saying certain things in certain ways, by having family phrases, by having those kind of locutions. So in this novel, the women, particularly in this family, have this little tic where they put these extra endings on the ends of verbs. They don't say sleep, they say sleepo. They don't say eat, they say eatify.
It's a sort of reverse gerund, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I mean, it's just a bit of nonsense, really. And it arises out of things that I've heard people use constructions like that just for fun.
Well, of course, if it is anything at all, if it is a something novel at all, as opposed to an everything novel, it's a dynastic novel. It's 4 generations, culminating in the Moor of the title, who is living at double speed. He gestated in 4.5 months, and he's hit the age of about 70 by 35. And I wondered what that was about. What were you getting at?
Well, I wanted the book in general to have a sense of great urgency about it, a sense of running out of time. I wanted the book, it was one of the reasons why the book is written in such a compressed and condensed way. And there's an awful lot of plot in 450 pages. It could easily have been 900.
It could have been 9 novels.
Yes, it could. And I first of all, I always feel that one of the ways of reflecting the kind of superabundance of India is to try and put 9 novels into one, or enough material for 9 novels into one. But I also felt myself a kind of sense of great urgency, and I wanted to communicate that as intensely and passionately as I could, of maybe we don't have as much time as we think, that sort of feeling. I think it's a feeling that many of us now have. We have a sense of history running away with us, of things moving so fast that we can't hang on to their coattails, of whoever's driving the carriage, that maybe the horse is bolted. I think that's a sense that we all have about living at this moment in time, and what I wanted. Then I thought to myself, supposing we make that literally true. Supposing we'd have a character in whom that metaphor becomes literal, and so he actually is living faster than he should. That time for him moves too fast. So he has this sense of only having half a life, and therefore having no time to waste. That was a way of communicating the more general urgency that I felt.
We can't get away from politics completely, because, of course, all your books are suffused with politics. Politics functions also as a background, but also very much as a foreground. And I thought the metaphor for that in The Moor's Last Sigh is the way that Aurora flirts with politics, and in the sense that she's flirting, or at least having a relationship with Pandit Nehru.
She might be.
Well, she might be. Yes, you do sort of hint at that.
Yeah.
But politics is enormously important in your books.
Yes, I've always thought that we can't leave it out anymore. That's to say, to write a novel simply about private life in which the public sphere does not impinge is not true to any of our life experience. That's to say, these days, decisions made in rooms that we're not present in affect our daily lives every day. If the pound crashes, we get fired. If the mortgage rate goes up, we have to sell our house. We are constantly affected in the most intimate ways by the public sphere. And so I've always thought that one should write not political novels, that's to say not novels about politics and politicians, but novels in which the public sphere is an intrinsic part of life, in the same way as falling in love or sex or death or food, or work are parts of life. So is that sphere. And I've tried to find the points at which the private lives of people, the private lives of the characters in the novel, intersect with the public life of the nation, and how those two things affect each other.
There's been a bit of a row about one of the characters, about the cartoonist, who is now a Hindu political leader, and there has been some complaints from the man who is caricatured therein. Now, the crude critics have suggested that you were trying to redress the balance and offend everybody just so that the Muslims would get off your back, but that's not true at all, is it?
Well, no, of course not. I'm simply trying to write about what I see, and it is simply the case in India that the growth of very extremist, quite violent, communalist politics of all sorts, but primarily Hindu nationalism, is a very dangerous force, in my view, very dangerous for the democratic structure of the country. And of course, extremist nationalisms are not unique to India, and I think there are resonances right here in England and Europe, with the growth of similar extreme nationalist groups. I mean, it's inescapable that the novel does deal with a Hindu communalist party and its leader, and since it's set in Bombay, and Bombay is currently run by a Hindu communalist party with a leader, that there are obviously echoes between the two. But all I would say is that the real-life leader, Bal Thackeray, is not the only model for the character of Raman Fielding in my novel. There are many other models. And for instance, when I was last in India, I met a lot of political leaders and community leaders when I was traveling around making a documentary about the country. And there were quite other political leaders who were the models for some aspects of the book. I mean, there was a guy I met in a quite different town to Bombay, who sat in his garden with a lap full of money that his followers had given him, and absently, while he talked to me, hand-rolled each individual note as if he was rolling a cigarette. Now, this little device has nothing to do with Mr. Thackeray. And what I'd say is this: in Midnight's Children, when I wished to offer a critique of what Mrs. Gandhi had done during the period of emergency rule, I had a character in the novel called Indira Gandhi. And if in this novel I had wished to simply make a critique of Bal Thackeray, there would have been a character in the novel called Bal Thackeray. The fact that he isn't called that he's called Raman Fielding, is because I'm trying to make a broader point than just one party, one person. I'm trying to say that this is a national phenomenon in India, the growth of such parties and the emergence of such figures, and not only in India. I think in my mind, one of the most important models for the character of Raman Fielding, the Indian extremist politician, was the Russian leader Vladimir Zhirinovsky. A lot of what I read about Zhirinovsky and his behavior gave me ideas which I've transposed into this Indian character. So while it is absolutely true, and I don't deny, that the novel passionately dissents from the kind of extremist politics represented by the Shiv Sena, Mr. Thackeray would be wrong to believe himself to be the only model. I should also say that he did begin his life as a very, very biting political satirist, cartoonist himself. So he knows very well the form of political satire. He's been very good over his life at dishing it out. And I would simply say that he ought not to be so thin-skinned when it comes his way.
He ought to be able to take it if it can give it.
Yeah.
I wonder if I could ask you to read a passage of
Certainly.
The Moor's Last Sigh. I've selected one which I think is appropriate and really rather good. And if you wouldn't mind.
Thanks. Yes, this is about the narrator, the Moor, having this problem we talked about. I'll say it again. From the moment of my conception, like a visitor from another dimension, another timeline, I have aged twice as rapidly as the old earth and everything and everyone thereupon. 4.5 months from conception to birth, how could my two-timing evolution have given my mother anything but the most difficult of pregnancies? As I see in fancy's vision the accelerated swelling of her womb, it resembles nothing so much as a movie special effect, as if under the influence of some twice-pushed genetic button, her biochemical pixels had gone loco and begun to morph her protesting body so violently that the speeded-up outward effects of my gestation actually became visible to the naked eye. Premature, post-mature is much more like it. 4.5 months in the wet and slimy felt much too long to me. From before the beginning, I knew I had no time to waste. Passing from lost waters towards necessary air, jammed solid in Aurora's lower passages by my Susu's rather military decision to salute the moment by standing at attention, I decided to let people know about the urgent nature of my problem and unleashed a mighty bovine groan. Aurora, hearing my first sound emerging from inside her body, and getting a sense, too, of the immense size of what was waiting to be born, was at once appalled and impressed, but not naturally lost for words. After our eeny, meeny, miny, she gasped at the frightened ecclesiastical midwife, who was looking as if she'd heard a hound from hell, "I think, sister, here comes moo." From moo to moor, from first groan to last sigh, on such hooks hang my tales.
Well, that's true, isn't it? Every time you come across a possible pun, you use it. The one that struck me is that he's got a deformed hand, and he says that fate. He says something like, "Fate dealt me a bad hand."
That's right.
I wondered if the idea of the hand came first, or that little phrase was prompting. Was that the hook on which you thought, "Oh yes, that would work"?
No, sometimes it does happen that you think of an idea just in terms of a piece of language. In that case, wasn't so. I was quite pleased to find the phrase afterwards. The idea of the hand was very important in this novel because, first of all, he is the child of a great artist, a difficult person to be a child of at the best of times, and even more difficult when you find that in your case the hand of the maker, so to speak, is completely dysfunctional because it's from birth a ruined hand. So initially, this broken hand, is a kind of poignant aspect of him. It's a kind of part of his, if you like, his tragedy, that he is incapacitated in the middle of a family of such brilliant makers. But however, one of the things I've tried to suggest in this novel, which is about secrets in our lives that lie beneath the apparent surfaces of things, that there is a secret in his hand, and that he eventually, when he's expelled from the paradise of his family, he learns this secret. And the secret is that this hand is in fact not a weak thing, but actually it's an extremely powerful, potent thing because it contains within itself the capacity for great violence. It packs a hell of a punch.
But it's powerful destructively rather than creatively.
That's right. He discovers a violence in him, which is a destructive violence, but if you like, a destructive violence of equal size to the creative genius of his mother. And he embraces it, and he embraces, that's to say, this dark truth about himself. And I wanted in the novel to suggest, I hope the novel has a very bright and enjoyable surface. I hope that it's really, it has a lot of fun and comedy on the surface. But I wanted to suggest that beneath that fun and comedy, there are some darknesses in ourselves. There are some darknesses in the society that the book describes, and that the book tries to eventually penetrate to those. And the darkness about Moor is the violence latent in his heart.
Oh, and also the darkness of his father, which he learns about towards the end of the book as well.
Yeah, I mean, there the father and the mother, of course, are the two giant figures in his life. The mother, bright and brilliant and creative. The father, if you like, overtly self-effacing, but beneath that rather effaced exterior, a kind of giant of his own sort, a very dark giant, extremely, who becomes more and more and more powerful, and also more and more corrupt as the book goes on. And poor old Moor has to deal with both these parents, and it's not surprising that he's a bit of a mess.
Salman, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.